So we have people on there. Thank you. So let me just ensure that our online presenters can hear me. Can you hear us? Can you hear me? And let's see if we can hear them. Actually, that's probably more important. People who are online, can you unmute yourself and just say hi so that we are sure that we can hear you?
Hi, I can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you, Lakshmi. And the other person?
Hi, I can hear you, but it's not very clear.
It's not.
Not very clear.
It's not very clear. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay. Any technical, who is the technical person in this room? Sir, he does. You can hear me. Okay, perfect. But he was trying. Okay, so why don't we start? How much time do I have? I did not do my homework and did not read this instruction. What's the total time?
No, so it's 9
10 minutes. Okay, so your 10 minutes starts now. You start.
Thank you.
You have the first presenter, Shafa Tasnim from Sanem. So you have home ground advantage.
Good afternoon, everyone. The paper that I'm going to present today is Impact of Government Investment in Human Capital to harness the demographic dividend that Bangladesh is experiencing and probably will experience up to 2040. It's still in a very early stage, but I'd like to hear from you and your feedbacks on this. As we all know that Bangladesh is going to experience its demographic dividend up to 2040. However, but are we doing enough to harness this or to leverage the demographic dividend? That is a question. According to a recent Human Capital Index of World Bank, it was told that a child who is born in Bangladesh will be maximum 46% if they enjoy their full education or health benefits from Bangladesh. The education and health facilities are also not in a very good state. Healthcare is very stagnated and education has gone down, in fact, post COVID. From the relevant literature, what we have seen that, however, if we can spend 1% on education, it contributes to 0.34% in GDP per capita. And various literature has found that education has some mixed effects. That in long term, it does not have much effect, but in short term, it has positive outcome. And in case of health, it shows a quite positive outcome. So the research question today is how do government spending on education and health influence the employment growth, which might help in leveraging the demographic dividend in the long run as well as in the short run. And how can Bangladesh leverage its demographic transition to maximize employment and achieve a sustainable economy? It's the same. So for data, I've taken data from World Bank development indicators. The time period that I have chosen is from 1990 to 2022. It's basically based on the availability of the data. And for dependent variable, I have taken employment growth, which I have calculated from the total employment and employment to population ratio that is given in the WI indicator. For explanatory variable, I have used government spending on education, health, GDP growth rate, population growth rate. For control variables, I have tried to see stunting and adult literacy as they indicate the investment on health and education. For methodology, I have tried to, for theoretical foundation, I have tried to follow Cobb-Douglas so that I can see that whether employment growth will be affected by a good spending on education and health, along with some other factors like GDP and population growth, etc. For model, I have used ARDL model. Of why ARDL model was chosen is because it can show both it can do the calculation for both stationary and non-stationary, I mean, both at level and at first difference level. And it is efficient for small sample sizes as well. Like I didn't have data for more than 30 years, so around 32 years. So it is efficient for that. And AirDL also reduces endogeneity concerns as they use the lagged variables. There were some data missing in the government expenditure. So for that, I did and the optimal length was selected by that. And stationary test was done by augmented decay Fuller system as usual. Okay, so then the stationarity test, I took the log value of all the variables that is as it is followed in Cobb-Douglas method, that it is the log transformation is done, and employment growth, education spending, health, those were stationary at level, and GDP growth was stationary at first difference. Now the short run impact of the in short run, as we have already seen from the literature as well, the education spending, health spending, and GDP growth all were significant, and it shows a positive effect that if 1% 1 unit of education is spent, then there is an increase by 3%, and for health it's more, it's like 10%. In long run, the effect is a little less. For education, it shows that although it is significant at 1% level, but the effect is less. So there might be some other causes that that affect the employment growth other than education spending, which were not added in this model. And for health, it shows a negative effect in the long run. For GDP, it shows a 3% increase in the long run. I did some diagnostic tests as well. The normality test was done and it showed the model is normal. And for serial correlation, there was no serial correlation. Although the model shows that there is some short and long run impact, short and long run impact, but the model could have I could have added an error correction term which could represent the speed of adjustment towards long run equilibrium. That could be an addition in the model. Other than that, the time span is very less in this model as the data was not available. So that is a limitation of this study as well. Other than that, various other policy variables like interest rate, trade policies, or any other pandemic shocks or political variables, those were missing, which could impact the effect of demographic dividend in Bangladesh.
Perfect. We have 3 more minutes to spare. Any clarificatory question for Safa and her co-author? But it's clarification, so if it is not, then I'll.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
What's your name? Can you tell us?
I'm Mohammad Asif Hossain, a first semester student of economics. As I have yet to complete my studies, I am not to acquainted.
Just ask your question, sir.
Things. So I would like to ask that you have comparison the government investment in the area with the human capital development. So did you take into account the quality and the type of government investment in the research, or did you just analyze the fact that if government investment is increased, the human capital development also shifts in a positive way? Or could there be any qualitative research that could also be done, like how the government should invest, in what ways, in what sectors? So could further research that delve into the types of investment could be established?
It's a very long question, so you don't have to answer it now. Maybe when we go back to discussion session. Yes, I know who you are. Rubaya, currently at the Department of Economics. By the way, guys, you guys say Department of Economics, but don't say University of Dhaka. You know there are other Department of Economics in Bangladesh, right? And in the whole world.
Hi, I'm a faculty at the Department of Economics.
University of Dhaka.
Shafa, I just have a question in terms of the
Short
measure-
question, please.
The measure you're using, you said you're using adult literacy rate, right? So I just wanted to ask whether you think that's a reliable measure in human capital and what you're looking at, because adult literacy rate has its own limitations. I just wanted to hear what you think about that. And whether you think it's reliable to make a claim from using that as an education measure.
Yeah, I would also consider that a much deeper question. I think it's also related to what he's asking as well. So can we just put a pin on that? We can come back to this. Okay. So why don't we go to the second presentation? So we have the second presentation from Lamisa. She's a graduate student, University of Dhaka. She didn't tell us which department.
She's also from Department of Economics.
Okay. Good for you. And she'll be talking about cross-industry comparison of intellectual capital's impact on productivity and financial performance. Nice, please. Your 10 minutes starts now.
Good afternoon. I'm here to present my research work on the impact of cross-industry comparison of intellectual capital on financial performance and productivity in the pharmaceutical and banking sector in Bangladesh. Okay, so in today's knowledge-based economy, intangible assets like intellectual property or skilled labor are critical for business to succeed. While traditional financial statements often overlook this intellectual property, all of this play a significant role in a company's overall performance. My research focuses on intellectual capital, which is basically the non-material assets of a firm that contribute to its overall performance that are, I chose two sectors, which are the pharmaceutical industry and banking sector because of their contribution in our GDP. My study's primary goal is to determine and compare how intellectual capital affects different industries, what opportunities and challenges are unique to intellectual capital management, and how effective intellectual capital management can contribute to long run. My research will provide valuable insight to researchers, business executives, and policymakers. So here's the question remains that how do I quantify intellectual capital? So to quantify intellectual capital, I used the most used method, which is Pulick's value-added intellectual capital method, or in short, we can say just VAIC method. So VAIC is comprised of three components, which are structural capital efficiency, human capital efficiency, and capital employed efficiency. Human capital efficiency is a measure of how well a company uses its employee to create value. Structural capital efficiency is a measure of how successfully an organization uses its infrastructure. And capital employed efficiency evaluates how well a business uses its capital. Here's a framework of the VIC model. My research objective is to examine and compare the significant impact of intellectual capital on the productivity and financial performance of Bangladeshi companies. And here's a brief outline of my research questions. And these are the overarching hypotheses of my studies. Now I'll move to the literature review section. So as we can see, literature in Bangladesh, most of the literature in Bangladesh shows a positive impact of intellectual capital on financial performance. But most of this research shows that the financial positive association was factor specific. As in, different factors show different positive impact, like structural capital or human capital has different influence on different industries in Bangladesh. These are some findings from international literature, which basically shows the same thing, like human capital or structural capital, different factors influence different industries in a different way. So the key takeaways from the literature review was that the effect of intellectual capital on company performance in Bangladesh, although it has been a subject of several research papers, most of these studies demonstrate a positive association, but there are differences in the contributions of the three main intellectual capital components, which are structural capital efficiency, human capital efficiency, and capital employed efficiency. And while existing research explores the connection between intellectual capital and farm performance, comparative analysis is lacking, and very few studies measured how successful intellectual capital is at raising farm productivity. I'll move to the methodology section. So my data set was collected manually from the annual financial statements of the farms for 2 unbalanced panels of a total of 49 farms, among which 25 were banks, including Islamic banks, and 24 were pharmaceutical companies, and all of them are listed on the Dhaka Stock Exchange. And my study employed a panel regression analysis, and the time frame for the collected data spans 4 years from 2019 to 2022. And although my original sample consists of a total of 200 observation or financial statements across all years, because of the unavailability of 16 annual reports on the website, 16 reports from the pharmaceutical were excluded, which left me with a sample of 184 financial statements across 4 years. My study employs a total of 3 dependent variables, 4 independent variables, and 2 control variables. The dependent variables of my study were return on investment and return on asset as a proxy for farm financial performance, and asset turnover ratio as a proxy to measure farm productivity. The independent variables of interest were value-added intellectual capital itself and the components of value-added intellectual capital, which are structural capital efficiency, human capital efficiency, and customer capital efficiency or capital employed efficiency. And the control variable I used were farm age and farm size. These are the measure of how I calculated the independent variables. As I can see, value added is a sum of net income after tax, taxes paid, depreciation, employee wages and salaries. Same way, human capital is a sum of administrative expenses and employee salaries. And all of the data were available on the Dhaka Stock Exchange websites. These are the measurements of the variables. So there was an issue in my research, which were multicollinearity problem, because VAIC was a sum of its 3 components, so including all of them at the same model created multicollinearity problem. As I can see from the correlation analysis, which I did prior to regression analysis, I can see there are extremely high correlation between human capital efficiency and value-added intellectual capital. So including all of them at the same model created multicollinearity problem. So I developed one model for VAIC as an independent variable and another for all the components of VAIC as independent variables for each dependent variable. And because it was a comparative study, I ran regression for 2 separate sectors, one for the banking sector and another for the pharmaceutical sector, to identify the separate influence. And a total of 12 models have been run for 2 sectors. This is the model breakdown for the banking sector, and we can see there are 6 models for the banking sector and 6 for the pharmaceutical sector. So I have done 2 diagnostic tests, which are Haussmann tests to determine if random effect is more suitable than fixed effect model, and Woolrich test to see if the presence of autocorrelation is detected for fixed effect models of the 3 dependent variables. Now I'll move to the results section. So this is the regression result for the banking industry, where components of VAIC were used as independent variables and ROI as dependent variable. Because I had some slide limitation, I could not include all the regression results in my slide. So here we can see that structural capital efficiency and capital employed efficiency has significant impact on ROI in the banking industry. This is the regression result for banking industry where VAIC itself is independent variable and ROA is the dependent variable. Now from the findings, I have found that in both industries, value-added intellectual capital had a positive relationship with profitability, but the degree of this relationship differed. Value-added intellectual capital appeared to have a stronger impact on the banking industry, especially in terms of return on investment. But my findings indicated a slightly positive relationship between value-added intellectual capital and bank productivity, but no significant relationship between VAIC and productivity in the pharmaceutical industry was found. In the banking industry, capital employed efficiency had no statistical significant impact on productivity or profitability, but we found a substantial positive relationship in Bangladesh's pharmaceutical industry between capital employed efficiency, ROI, ROA, and asset turnover ratio. An interesting finding from our study is the association between structural capital and profitability of banks. Although we did not find any significant association between structural capital efficiency and farm profitability in the productivity in the pharmaceutical sector, we did find a negative association between structural capital efficiency and profitability in the banking industry.
Can you wrap up? The time is basically up.
Sorry. And these are the policy recommendation, which is basically investing in the correct intellectual capital and policies that acknowledge the worth of intangible assets to address skill gaps in both sectors. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we can't go to a question right now. So we have to move to our online presenters now. So we can start with Raj Lakshmi Singh. We will be talking about parents' assessment of children's learning abilities and their school-based involvement. So can you, if you can hear us, maybe you can start. You should be
Yes,
able
I
to
can
see.
hear you.
Perfect.
Let me start sharing my screen. Is my PPT visible?
Just give us a second because it's not visible. We are trying to get it to the screen so that other folks can see it.
Is it visible now?
No, but I want
Other folks to see because you have a laptop. Other folks did not. Sorry, Lakshmi, just give us 1 second.
Okay.
এখানে একটা স্ক্রিনশট অফ করে দেওয়া হয়েছে।
Okay. Oh, perfect. Oh, great. Can you share your screen, your slides, and maybe you can
Yes,
start
I
it?
have already shared. Is it visible now?
Not yet.
আমি ক্যান্সেল করে দিয়েছিলাম, একবার করতে হবে না। স্যার ওনার স্ক্রিনশট অফ করে দিয়েছিলাম, আরেকবার।
Oh, can you share your screen again?
Okay, sure.
can't see your slides. Yes. Yeah, please
Now?
go.
Is it
Yeah.
moving?
Yes,
Hello?
it's moving.
Okay, thank you. So shall I start my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the topic of my presentation is parents' assessment of children's learning abilities and their school-based involvement, evidence from an experimental survey of low-achieving learners in Uttar Pradesh, India. So just to begin with, in India, India has made substantial progress in terms of school enrollment, where many of the children are enrolled in schools, including the rural area. However, the question is, are the children learning or they're lagging behind in terms of the foundational learning? So the World Bank report shows that around half of the children in India are not able to read a simple paragraph by the age of 10, and most of the literatures reveal that these are the children who come from the marginalized background, from lower caste female children, and those who are from the low income families. And then the children, and the literature also reveals that the children who are attending the government schools are having the low level of learning as compared to the private schools, and several factors are responsible for this low learning outcomes. And this graph, I would just share this, explain this graph. So uh, this is the graph which shows that the learning outcomes of the children enrolled in the, fifth grade over the learning of children enrolled in from the age group 6 to 14 years. And then this graph clearly shows that literacy here means whether the child is able to read the second standard paragraph, and numeracy is the whether the child is able to do the division, 3-digit division with reminder. So it shows that around 50% of the children are not able to read the second standard paragraph, whereas the two-thirds of the children are not able to do the third digit division, which they are probably they are supposed to do if they are enrolled in the fifth grade. Now this shows the learning crisis, and which is evident all over the world, and the World Bank report 2018, which also declares the learning crisis in low income countries. Now the question is, who is accountable for the low learning outcomes among children, and how do you handle this learning crisis? When we see on the ground that there are conflicting views on the responsibility of teachers and parents. Teachers often place the blame to the parents that they are not giving attention to the children's education. On the other hand, parents depend on the teachers to ensure that their children are learning. So now, in the recent decades, policymakers and development practitioners, they call for the collective efforts from all stakeholders like teachers, parents, and the communities. If they will be involved, then we can probably ensure that or improve our children's education and learning. Now the focus is on the short route of accountability, which means that if provide increasing the direct power of citizens over the service providers in the public goods like education and health. So here in this case, like if citizen will monitor the services in schools, and they will monitor the teachers and all, then probably the outcomes will be improved. So strengthening social accountability, which requires active citizen participation in monitoring public services, has been recognized as a promising approach to enhancing the governance and the quality of education. Now in this background, we have the research questions. We are trying to address some of the research questions that if we are including the citizens or the parents as such to improve the outcomes, then we need to understand whether they have the correct assessment of their children's learning. Do they understand that their children are learning or not, and how do they understand, who are understanding their children's learning abilities, which is which is important when we are focusing on the social accountability, because parents with right assessment probably bring the changes if they are correctly which means if they are correctly assessing their children's learning abilities, then they can raise the concerns to the schools and teachers and bring the changes. In this context, we have the research question that we have two research questions broadly, that do parents correctly perceive their children's learning? How does the perception vary across parents' socioeconomic characteristics? Associated with the involvement in schools. Who gets involved with schools is also more important questions, because of the question of elite capture in the rural area. So our study is basically in the context of rural India. We use data from the accountability from the grassroots project. This project is led by Real Center in the Faculty of Education at University of Cambridge, and the Pratham, which is a civil society organization in India, and who has been conducting the educational assessment of the children in rural India. So the methodology they've used is the RCT. So the design was the randomized control trial, where the objective was to assess the both community and school community intervention on improving the foundational learning of the low achieving learners. Now, for this study, we used the baseline survey, which was conducted in October 2018 to January 2019. Then the midline was conducted in November 2019 to March 2020, and the end line was from December to January 2022. So the for this 400 villages in Sitapur district of Uttar Pradesh were selected, and in 200 villages uh, only 200 villages both school and community intervention happened, and then 100 villages only community intervention, and 100 and another 100 villages on no intervention taken place, which means the control villages. And the total schools included 848, and the total number of children were 24,000, and all the children were enrolled in the government school. So the villages were selected where at least two government schools would be there, and then the children are from second grade, third grade, and the fourth grade. And the selection was such that none of the children. So the assessment happened, and those children who were below the paragraph level, they were in the sample. uh, I will just explain this thing. So this is the ASER assessment tools, where the second standard, there are four levels, where the highest level is the second standard paragraph. You can see from this figure, and the first standard paragraph only 3-4 simple sentences, and then the word level and the letter. So if a child, so it starts from the first standard paragraph, and if child does a three or more than three mistakes, then they will come to the next level, which means the word level. And similar, and like that, if children can read, uh, or if children will be asked to read the four or five words, and if they are able to do that, then they will come to the highest level, or otherwise they will come to the lowest level. So this is how it happens. And then for this project, it was like the sample children included only those who were second standard paragraph, which means that they are in the first standard paragraph, and or the word level and the letter level. For this study, we restricted our sample to only the children who are in the word level, who are in the letter level, or just the beginner. The reason that we did is because parents, that I will explain in the later slide. So yeah, so I'll not explain the intervention for the time constraint. So now the question,
You have
so
only
the variables
2 more
that,
minutes. I'm sorry.
okay. So the
If you
perception
can
is,
show some of the results, I think that would be great.
yeah, I'll come to that. So the perception is, can the child able to read his or her Hindi textbook easily? This question was asked to the parents. And the school based involvement, whether parents visit schools knowing the teacher's name and the knowing about SMC. So now from here we can see that 35% of the parents are incorrectly perceiving their children's learning, because none of the children are able to read the second standard paragraph, where parents are saying that they are able to read. Now we look at who are these parents who are overestimating, and we can see that those parents who are from the higher caste and from the and having formal education and from the wealthier background, they are more likely to overestimate their children's learning. And now we see their association with the school based involvement, and we see that those who are incorrectly perceiving or overestimating, they are also more involved with the schools. And this is also significant when we checked, when we used the probability estimation and we see that the results are significant. So just to conclude that a significant proportion of parents tend to overestimate their children's learning abilities, and this overestimation being more prevalent among parents from higher socioeconomic background, and those who are in terms of the caste, in terms of education and the wealth. Now, why they are overestimating their children's learning? Probable reason may be the for socially desirable response, being from higher caste and having higher education, they are overestimating for the desirable response maybe. And then, however, this is problematic because this raises the question about the effectiveness of social accountability. On the other hand, parents with correct perception, those who are from the lower caste and having no formal education, they are perceiving correctly, but they are also less likely to involve with the schools. And there are some qualitative research which says that the structural barriers like the illiteracy, the poverty, which restricts the barriers that restrict the parents to be involved with the children's education. And there also exists the power dynamics in the school system where parents from marginalized background often feel incapable to engage with the schools and the teachers because of the power dynamics that exist in the schools. Uh, for the policy, there is a need for schools and teachers to actively communicate accurate information about children's learning to parents. Schools should prioritize the inclusion of parents from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and there also rotable gap between the policy and practices revealing shortcomings in both formation and operation of the SMC, where it is not functioning practically. There are some studies in this context. And also, parents are often invited by teachers to sign the documents to fulfill bureaucratic accountability requirements without engaging them in meaningful discussion related to children's learning. So these are very important to while looking into the improving the learning outcomes of the children in rural India. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. So thanks for your presentation. Again, since we don't have inter-presentation time left, we will go to our fourth and last formal presentation. So, Kabalia Mitra, if you can hear us, please share your. And I apologize if I have mispronounced your first name.
No, that's fine. One second.
We can hear you very well. So as soon as you can share your slides, we can start.
Can you see it now?
Yes, we can. So,
Okay, so can I start?
yes, can you just give me 1 second? There is a kind of a black rectangle.
Okay, yeah, there's the ribbon.
Can you see that as well? Can you?
Yeah, I can see that, but wait. Where to give it?
You have so many nice charts. We don't want to miss out those.
But how to? Okay. Yeah,
And I looked at your paper very.
it's done, no?
Yes. Why don't you go ahead, please?
Okay.
You have 10 minutes, so I may have to cut you at some point.
Yeah. 1 second.
Please go ahead.
I think it's not going back.
It's moving now.
Yeah. Okay. So good afternoon. So today I'm going to present my paper titled Lucas meets Heckman in India. Let me put this as a pretext that the Lucas that we are talking about here is not the growth theories that we know in economics, rather it's the sociologist Lucas about which we will talk about while moving forward. So the question that we're trying to address here is basically that does educational expansion reduce inequality in educational attainment? So, as a regional focus, I'm focusing on India, and also I'm focusing on the higher education aspect only. But I must claim, I must put into context the fact that it's not a causal claim. Rather, we are saying that after periods of growth of higher education in India, what is the, present situation of educational inequality in attainment, with particular focus to higher education in India. So if you look at the history, there are presently available demand and supply sides. So if you look at the demand side, there are students that are seeking higher skills and degree to signal their capability to get a job in the market. And the supply side, we have the higher education institutions that are providing educational services. But if you look at the theory part of what is the relationship between education distribution and earning, we have the Minserian equation. The classic paper by Gaker and Chivik, where they are actually establishing a positive relationship. Similarly, the Murphy and Welch paper that has argued that corrected educational policies can actually reduce inequality. But we are actually contesting that in context of sociological theories. So we are actually trying to evaluate two major sociological theories here. So first one is maximally maintained inequality theory, and the second one is effectively maintained inequality theory. I will come into these in details while moving forward. If you look at the history of Indian higher education here, so until 2013-14, this is taken from the research paper by Varghese in 2015. So across all the varieties of universities, there has been, sporadic growth, particularly after 2005-6. In case of private universities, we are seeing significant growth. After 2010-11, if we see, in terms of number of colleges and universities, both are actually experiencing year-on-year positive and significant growth rates. And if we compare public versus private universities in India, private universities are actually outdoing public universities in terms of numbers, though both the sectors are actually increasing. But if we look at the, across section attainment, just in terms of number, then we'll see that though there has been growth, experienced across different, social stratas of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward classes, but the gap between them is strictly maintained over the bit of time. You can see that from these diagrams. But if you look at across different disciplines, or you can say that different tracks, then across post-graduation, graduation, PhD, and MPhil, growth story has been steady. But only in case of MPhil, the rate of enrollment has reduced, maybe sociological theory of educational attainment. These two theories are actually founded, long back. What they are suggesting is that does it happen that over periods of growth, extending in a country, does it happen that having more number of institutions actually reduce the attainment inequality in any sort of educational setup? So Mayer model is basically a theoretical setup that actually says that, okay, if somebody is belonging from a marginalized background, does the background impact on education attainment is reducing? But if you look at the maximal maintained inequality hypothesis, that is actually a more formalized version of Mayer model. And EMI actually looks at the fact that, okay, if growth has been happening, then it can happen that the reduction in the coefficient of socioeconomic background has been prevalent. But it can also happen that those who are from the elite section of the society, they might preserve themselves into certain tracks that actually keeps their upper edge in a society, in terms of earning more money, in terms of having more societal status and all that. So we have adopted as a conceptual framework this Chetty et al. Paper, in our context. So if you look at the x-axis and y-axis, on y-axis we have the higher education attainment, on our x-axis we have age. So why we have age? Because we are using the National Sample Survey Organization's cross-section data. So what we are doing is that we are trying to analyze, we are trying to trace back individuals birth age, birth year, and following that we are actually calculating the age. And what we are seeing that over the year of expansion, as the age is actually increasing, on the right hand side, the disparity equilibrium, as you can see, I mean, the access for, I mean, those who are from lower socioeconomic status, that is increasing, but you can see that the inter-year gap that has been, consistently maintained over time. Now, moving on to the data sources, as I already mentioned, I have used the 2020 to 23 NSSO 79th round, that is a comprehensive annual modular survey. But I am focusing particularly on the age group between 18 to 29 years. That is, naturally in India preferred as, the students. I mean, the people who are preferred to be in education institutions. But you can ask that, okay, why it's not 18 to 25? The reason is that I'm actually focusing on the fact that, okay, if somebody is enrolled in PhD, 25 will be the ideal ways for them to enroll in PhD, not, I mean, to complete. But what I'm trying to say here is that those who are currently enrolled at any stage of, their, in particular track of, I mean, education in higher education in India. So I'm focusing on 18 to 29 years here. So if you look at the description of variables, I have just basic socioeconomic variables like household size, log of consumption expenditure, your subschooling sector, your social groups are there, the major religion is there, gender, age, marital status, and relationship to the head. But over and above that, I have tried to use a multiple correspondence analysis to construct your household educational resource index that actually, takes into account internet availability, computer availability, access to internet, access to computer, and access to scholarship, financial resources. So, I mean, you can see the, kernel density plot on the right side of the diagram. That is the plot for the, index that I've generated. So, looking at the continuous variables, these are the, descriptive statistics. Now, methodology has a special place here because, the initial Meyer model used a sequential logic model. And, our Cameron Heckman, James Heckman, they have discarded this model by arguing that this model does not take into consideration the unobserved heterogeneity of the, individual. So basically, unobserved heterogeneity, basically what their meaning is that, and somebody might gain, some other sort of, capability, that can actually in end reduce inequality instead of, the growth of education infrastructure in the country. So they have suggested some revisions that have actually come out in the form of a generalized linear latent mix model that I have adapted in this paper. So if you look at the GAAM framework, it accounts for individual unobserved factors, and it definitely gives a more nuanced understanding of the educational transition. So the main idea here is to capture how unobserved factors are actually influencing educational transitions. But in my paper, I'm not actually focusing on that. I'm just focusing this as a major factor and answer that, okay, if we are accounting for unobserved factors also, does the hypothesis still hold good? Yeah. So here we are actually,
Excuse me. So you have, if you can wrap up in 2 minutes, that would be great.
2 minutes.
So
Yeah, fine.
results, please.
Yeah. So I'm just, because the original setup is the multinomial setup, I have just adapted that into a binomial setup, and you can see the UIK is the, unobserved heterogeneity term. Now looking at first assessing the case of maximally maintained inequality hypothesis theory. So if you look at this, the results are actually available in the paper. I'm not able to put it here because it's very lengthy. So if you just look at the factors that are actually disadvantageous towards educational attainment, like a higher household size, or low level of low type of educational attainment, or not advantageous geographical location like belonging from a rural area and things like that. So what we're seeing is that the warning coefficient, the the coefficient of these disadvantageous factors is actually perceived. So this actually confirms the fact that those over the years of growth in higher education infrastructure in India, that has actually impacted in reduction of socioeconomic background in the country. But what it also, assesses, the paper assesses is that how is effectively maintained inequality hypothesis working in Indian context. So if you look at, the track specific, discipline specific assessment, some specific, your disciplines like engineering and prestigious disciplines, we are seeing that log consumption is actually very high odds ratio there. So this basically means that those who are from the upper caste, those who are actually having higher income and thus higher consumption, they are actually preserving for themselves those disciplines which will earn them more. So that will in turn maintain the level of inequality or the edge that they are having in the societal level. So just exactly opposite to that, if you look at the ITI courses, which are actually technical in nature, but you will say that those who are from those scheduled caste and lower level of strata of in the country, they are actually opting for those resources. So we are assessing, taking into consideration the unobserved heterogeneity factor, and we are confirming that both EMI and MMI are actually happening. Now coming to the last policy suggestions part, you will see
If you can wrap up, that would be great.
yeah. So the major policy suggestion that we are actually providing here is that there is a need for breaching digital divide. If you look at the paper, I have actually assessed what is the exact role of having computers and internet connection. On higher education attainment using propensity score matching and all that. So we also suggest for specific provided STEM support for SC/ST and rural students that actually increase their participation in particular courses to breach the inequality that is exactly happening. And further, there is definitely more need for inclusivity across higher education institutions that can actually ensure better representation of all students in all the disciplines, rather than the concentration that results in inequality in the future. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Right. So we are at the end of fourth grade presentation. Maybe we can give them one round of time. And hand over the discussion to Riaz, who will be discussing, I'm guessing, all four papers. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, sir. So it's only 15 minutes. I'll try to be like brief as much as possible. I'll and it's like very relatable to Bangladesh as well. There are a lot of private universities, public universities expansion. Is it reducing the inequality or not? It's very important. And but my question is it the educational expansion? Is it supposed to decrease the inequality or not? If you can discuss something like that in your paper, that would be nice. Also, you use a cross-sectional survey. It's 2020 to 23, and also it includes the students, the people from 18 to 29 years old. Okay, you have some interesting results. The main results is there is disparity in educational attainments against disadvantaged groups, and there is also rural-urban divides in educational attainments. So this might be also true for Bangladesh as well. I have some comments for the paper, like when you use the education attainments in higher education institutes, I think it's better if you kind of some exercise on more nuances of higher education institutes, like if you say IIT, it's IIT or other engineering. If you do some distinction between higher quality higher education institutes and the medium lower some categories, because quality matters. Also in education, when we do research in education, there is some problems as school resident bias. Because I don't know about India this data as well. In Bangladesh, like how we define household, because of that, some household member might not be in the household, so they're not they might not be considered in the survey. So if you can say something about that as well. And also a lot of students in Bangladesh and India maybe as well, go to abroad for their undergrads. I'm not sure if it's this type of students are included in your data. Okay, maybe also you used GLLMM to address your like endogeneity. I'm not sure how much it can address it. You may try instrumental variable or some policy shocks, something like that. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you. The third. That paper is the parents' assessment of children's learning abilities and their school-based involvement. I know one of the authors, Ricardo. If you say hello to Ricardo, okay, he's through by a supervisor. So you just two important research questions. One is, do parents correctly assess their children's learning? Does it vary across socio-economic characteristics? The second one, how is parental perception associated with involvement, parents' involvement in school, and mainly who gets involved with school? You use baseline data. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's as far as I know, it's only the baseline data. So I'd like to know why you use baseline data. You have midline and end-line data as well. About the intervention, you have two leg of intervention. First one is community intervention. The second one, community plus school intervention, and the control group, 100 villages. And also the intervention groups, the numbers are different for like 100 villages, community plus school, 200 villages. If you can properly motivate why it's a different number of intervention and control group. Interesting finding. So the findings, the parents overestimate children's learning, and that's mainly come from higher education background household, higher socioeconomic background household. This is also like it is more relatable to Bangladesh as well. Higher socioeconomic backgrounds people maybe like to show that their children are better than others, something like that. And also another interesting finding, parents with more correct perception for their children, they're from lower socioeconomic background, that they're less likely to be involved with school. That's also most probably true for Bangladesh as well, because of structural barriers and power dynamics. Same thing for Bangladesh. Okay, the one more thing about the policy recommendation. The first policy recommendation you mentioned, teachers should communicate to parents. I'm not sure if your results you can have strong enough results to give that kind of policy recommendation. Thank you. The second one, cross-country comparison of intellectual capital's impact on productivity and financial performance across industry. So yeah. So yeah, it's also interesting impact of like how intellectual capital can be positively associated to productivity and profitability. You've got some positive results and some no significant results as well. I think it's positive result for bank and no significant for pharma. You use 2019 to 2022 data. I think there is a COVID data as well. So if you want to say something about, because your outcome variables and other values might be distorted, so you can explore that if anything. Okay. And also you use two sectors in Bangladesh, banks and pharma companies. I'm not sure if you can just motivate more why you choose these two sectors, especially because I see one paper is Farouk et al. 2023. He did something for the banking sector and used DMM. So why still you need to do this exercise even there's another paper did for banking sector? Okay, about the methodology, you use all like panel data model, fixed effect, random effect, and phase difference. I'm not sure if I can say something, but I'm not. Now I think it's good practice to just stick to one. Like you can do just fixed effect, but you have to properly motivate why you are doing fixed effect, what you are doing, how you like controlling for heterogeneity or something like that. So you can explore more. And you also say you compare two results, banks and pharma industries regression result. I'm not sure if it's two different regressions. You are comparing the coefficients. I think you can put it in one regression, just one dummy for like banking or the pharma. Then you can compare the results if these are significant or not. Yeah, thank you. The first. I don't have much comment on that. It's impact of human capital investment on harnessing demographic dividend. So I just one small recommendation: if you when you are exploring that employment, you can try to like do disaggregated employment, like different sectors or something like that, because it's someone employed in some sector is different from other sectors, so we can explore them. Thank you.
Great. So why don't we open the floor? We already have some questions for the first presenter so far about measurement and things like that. So let me see some hands. How many of you have any question? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so why don't we take question from these 3 people first in the first round?
Is there another mic or is the only one? You're taking away my mic.
Sorry, it was
Power is taken from us. Maybe you can introduce yourself first. And
Hello, I'm Sharika Saiklia from Jagannath University Economics Department. Okay, I have a question toward Lamisa Hassan. And according to your paper, if the tangible capital is lesser relative to intellectual capital, is it possible to ensure optimal productivity in long run? And how can we explain this where we know that intellectual or eligible applicants or eligible employees are paid to move from lower paid job to higher paid job? And what will the context using the banking sector?
Thank you for the opportunity. I
have the question for Ms. Lamia Hassan. That is that in the slide you have shown the structural capital something. I don't know. I don't recall it properly. It has negative relation. So could you please elaborate what does the negative relation imply and how can we interpret it? Because I seem to miss something. Thank you.
Can you hear me online? Wait a second. Hi. Hello. Hi. My question is for Rajalakshmi. Hi. I was just wondering whether you disaggregated parents' involvement in terms of mothers and fathers, and whether there was anything interesting there, because I think it would be interesting to see the whole analysis be segregated and see whether mother's involvement is different from father's involvement, especially in the context of India.
Oh, no, I thought she was, yes. You don't have any question? Yes. Okay.
Good. So maybe we can hear quickly from our presenters. We can take a couple of minutes. I think we have time. I don't see any other hands. So we can start with maybe in reverse order. So Kai Boliapati, I actually have a follow-up question for you. I mean, it was a little difficult for us to follow, but the main idea is when people are going to higher education, like what kind of the impact of that on inequality? Is that the basic idea? I think the term that you use is transition. So perhaps you can give us a sense of what you mean by transition, and is that are you trying to understand the impact of the transition to higher studies by different routes like management and engineering? Maybe you can take some time to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
So we start from you, and then we go to Raghav-Lakshmi, and then the first two presenters. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for the questions. So I'll just start with your question only. I mean, because it's the last one. So my whole objective of this paper is basically that because over last 2 decades India has undergone in terms of at least number of universities. Ample number of universities have brought off. That's why the number of seats that can be considered, that is also the number of that also has increased. So what I was trying to understand is that because in higher education there are more people who could be enrolled, has that actually led us to breach the gap that is already existing across different social cross sections, across gender, caste, religion, and all that. So that was the whole my predicament to assess. So my transition, by transition, what I was basically meaning here is that from higher secondary to higher education. So if you look at the paper, I have also further discussed it across different levels of higher education, like post graduation, then your MPhil and PhD degree. I dealt with them separately, but that's the whole meaning of transition that I'm actually referring to there. Now coming to discussion answers questions. Thank you so much for them. So your session about categorizing based on quality, like IIT and all that. That's possible, but pretty difficult in my context because I'm actually looking at the household level, and at household level, I'm seeing if a household, some person in the household is actually enrolled in a higher education course or not. But what you have given, so I have to bring the supply side into context also. That's also one paper that I'm also actually working on, where I'm actually bringing one indicator of expansion, across qualities and everything, so that there can be a causal analysis that, okay, whether this is actually breaching the inequality gap or not. Thank you so much for the suggestion there. And about the students who are actually reading abroad, actually, there's a limitation that we have correctly highlighted, because the data source is actually focused on those who are within the periphery of India, and we are not actually looking at the students who are actually enrolled in abroad, abroad context. And the IV and that thing, yeah, actually that I have already taken into consideration. If you look at the paper, so I have tested, because one methodological criticism is a big standpoint of this question. So I have also taken IV as to SLS estimation that is presented in the paper as well. So yeah, thank you.
The other question I had is, so if I understood correctly, this participation in higher education helped the scheduled caste and people from scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, but not so much for Muslims and OBC. I believe this other backward caste, is that right? Sorry.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So, do you have any, number one, is my understanding correct? And number two, if it is correct, how should we make sense of it?
Yeah, so what I actually got, I mean, so the whole proposition of this theory is that okay, if I am from a, I mean, OBC background, and because that's a backward background, so does it happen that over years of expansion, the impact of my background on, you know, my educational attainment, in this case educational attainment, has the impact reduced or not? So that's what I mean, I'm trying to, you know, assess. I mean, though what I'm finding is that though the impact is still there, but over time it has reduced. But you know, the question you can definitely propose is that because a cross-sectional study, that from where are you bringing in the time dimension here? So I mean, it's a general procedure there that you actually deal individuals, you know, birth here as, you know, as one, I mean, year. Like, you know, if somebody is, from 1999, so what is the age that they are having here? And based on their age, you are saying that okay, over the age, across different higher ages, how that, you know, expansion actually is leading to, you know, decrease or increase in the coefficient. The name of warning coefficient that they have suggested, basically that basically means that over years, has, you know, the impact of that socioeconomic background reduced or not? So yeah.
So, Rajlakshmi, maybe you can answer the question about whether the gender of the parent and their involvement, does it make any difference or not?
Thank you for all the questions and comments. So, the question, the last question was I think mother's involvement and the father's involvement. If we can look at separately, right? If I understood correctly, so is this the question?
Yeah, that was a question from the floor, but you can, I think, also try to answer the question that was raised by the discussant as well. But please go ahead.
Yeah, so that we have not looked at like mothers. That was not our main questions, but we can see the deep separate involvement of both mothers and fathers, but that we have not looked at so far. And then the first question, like the other questions from the discussant, was I think why we used the only baseline survey data and not the intervention. So the reason is this paper is actually work on progress, and it is not yet we have not yet completed. And the first part we looked at the impact. We only used the baseline, but we are also working on the other aspect, which is to look at the impact of intervention on change in perception and also on the involvement. So that we are working on it. And regarding the teachers, like whether in terms of policy aspect, that if teachers could communicate the parents correctly and provide the correct information to the parents. So this is in terms of the parent teacher association, and then the providing the report card. So if what we believe is that if there is a common understanding of all the stakeholders together, and since while giving the report cards and while giving the information to the parents, if teachers could provide the accurate information, then parents probably have the good understanding of their children's learning, and then that might help to improve the learning outcomes of children. So, but again, we need to work on it, like the other aspects and other policy things that we need to think about it.
Are you still running the experiment or is it over?
Any other questions I let? I'm not sure because of the technical glitches. Maybe I missed some of them.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, just to be clarified, is the experiment over already or?
Hello.
I believe it is. Okay. Oh, cool. So then we turn to Lamisa.
Why those two sectors?
Wait, what's your name?
Yeah. Yeah or yeah?
Yeah.
No come.
Okay. I'll move to Kya.
Yeah. Not the flower, the boat.
Okay, I'll move to Kia's question first, which was whether tangible asset is less important than intangible assets. So the answer to that is tangible asset is not less important than intangible assets, but the importance of intangible assets is mostly ignored when the companies make financial statements or annual reports. They don't include the effect that intangible assets or intangible capital has over their firm performance or productivity. So I thought it would be a good idea to explore this side because tangible assets are already there and it's not ignored. Of course, like the importance of both assets are there, and when a farm can utilize both of them very efficiently, only then they can make it very profitable. And your second question was regarding job. I didn't quite get that. Would you please repeat?
Well, higher people are employees are paid higher paid job regarding to lower paid job. So if I paid low, and since our employees are more intelligent and they require more wages, and if we pay low, and what would be their response? And wouldn't they shift to higher paid job and leave the current job?
If they're more educated?
Yeah, they're more educated.
I think there is an element to that, but I think because yeah, I think your question is from labor economics. My study is not related to that, but I think it would be very interesting to explore that area. Thank you. The second question was from what's your name? Asim. Okay. So you asked about the negative association between structural capital efficiency and profitability in the banking industry. So the rationale could be because banking profitability, I measured banking profitability over short periods in my study. It was from 2019 to 2022. And the benefits of structural capital like improved risk management or employee efficiency, this might take longer to translate into financial gains. And moreover, while some level of structural capital is necessary, excessive investment in processes and procedures can lead to bureaucracy and inefficiency. So this might be the cause behind it.
Are you planning further research on the long-term effect?
Yes,
See
yes.
if it's not negative, but with no relation. Could there be no relation, or is it all going to be always negative? You can do structural improvements while keeping in mind the efficiency. So would it be possible? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be really interesting to
So,
do that.
yeah, I think I suggest that you could include that and check if the similar research has been done.
Similar research has been done, but my research was a cross-industry comparison, which has not done. So I think it would be interesting to incorporate your suggestion that I do the long-run research and do the cross-industry comparison as well. I'll keep that in. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll answer the Asim's questions first about the qualitative aspect of the service delivery or educational spending or health spending. I didn't find any that variable in that dataset like that, but I can consider institutional quality or something like that. I'll keep that in mind.
Could you elaborate with that? How would you consider that? Because I'm not into the so
there are some data variable in world development indicator for institutional quality and regulatory some variables related to that. I think those can indicate what is the condition of the institutions or government services in Bangladesh. I can consider that.
is it a scale from this number to this? The quality is going to be on the lower end and side is the higher end, is it like that?
Quality of what, sir?
Quality of the institution.
It's talking about the regulatory.
Oh,
Those variables.
but there's no variation, it's only one country, right? You're looking at only one country.
He's talking about the qualitative aspect of the government service delivery or
That the investment.
education, whether the investment is
Investment গুলো কোথায় হচ্ছে basically, কিভাবে হচ্ছে? আর একভাবে ইনভেস্টমেন্ট হলে ওটা কি ইরেলেভেন্ট হবে কিনা মানে হিউম্যান ক্যাপিটাল ইউজ করা
সেটা হয়তো এই ডেটা সেট থেকে পসিবল হবে না আমাকে আর বুঝতে হবে।
Anything else would you like to add?
About the question on adult literacy, whether it is correct or not, I thought as I'm as the government is spending on education or health, so that would reflect more with adult literacy. I also thought about lower secondary completion rate, as it is mostly free for girls, I think, up to class 8. So I think I can use that as well for everyone. I think I'll be continue. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Good. Sorry. There's no light here. I think the session is over, so they're trying to shut me out. Okay, is it working? Yes. Perfect. Okay, thanks so much. So this was a session on human capital development, in case anybody is still wondering. And I think the 4 papers are quite interesting in the sense that it covered the whole spectrum of it. So maybe we can start from the very top, when people are working in an industry or in a farm. So I think the nature of human capital, broadly speaking, would probably be intellectual capital, etc. I think there's still I'll just assume that I think question looming, what do we actually mean by that? And how do we quantify that? This was a tall order, and I really want to congratulate Lamisa to actually taking this challenge up. And also like to highlight that she's using this quite interesting data set, which is publicly available, and I may even encourage her to can expand the data set. I mean, you can, I don't know how many, even if you think about the stock market, the companies that are participating there, they all have to share the type of data that you're using, right? So you can easily expand it both over time and across factories or across companies. So that's one aspect of it. I think we are still struggling to understand and whether you can really, how much you can capture this intellectual capital from the type of publicly available data that you have. So that's something that you may want to look into. And then we come to the little backward. I think Kai Balapoti's work is very interesting because he is looking basically into people moving to higher education. I think it actually applies to almost all of us here. So whether you have made the right decision or not, and that's actually something that he's trying to figure out. But what I found for myself interesting is he's also looking at heterogeneity. My interpretation of his results, so he can definitely disagree with me. But I think what I found interesting is even when people are thinking about getting into college or university or doing MPhil or even PhD, people with different sociological background may have different types of experience coming out of it. And this is very important, and this may even have many different type of public policy implication. Then comes the schooling part, and what Rajlakshmi is looking into. And definitely governance is a very big issue, and my assessment of my children's education, that's kind of the service that we are supposed to get from Education Institute. But people may have a very different and sometimes misaligned expectation of what our children are learning. And it seems like people overestimate. People even overestimate their own ability. There is a name for that in psychology literature called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Apparently, that is actually applicable to our children as well. So there you go. I have one comment for her. You have preferred explanation, which comes from, this is social desirability bias. But it can also be quite behavioral, it may say. For example, people with higher socioeconomic group may have very different expectations from their children. So this different reference point can also explain why more educated parents may have even misaligned, like higher level of misaligned expectation. And obviously the policy implication of that interesting, because unless I demand a better service, I'm not going to get it. And if I already think that I'm getting a good service because my children are learning, I'm not going to want it. So correcting that misalignment can be quite interesting. Then coming to kind of at the macro level, Safa's work, because she's looking at macro level data to understand a macro level phenomena. I think the main suggestion I may have is why bother time series? I mean, you have those data for all the countries in the world. So partly I'm biased because I'm not a time series econometrician at all. But it seems like a missed opportunity for you not to use data from other countries. And some of your findings are, I think it will be richer. And you may also, I think one question that came from the floor, which I also wrote down, is the quality of the education, not the quantity per se. Unfortunately, that kind of data is not available for most countries. But you can certainly look into that. Eric Hanushek has a lot of work in this area, and he's actually using a lot more countries. So that's something that you may want to look into. Other than that, I think it's I will conclude by saying that of all places where government needs to do better and where public policy implication is of the highest importance is the human capital investment, especially education, also health, of course. And that's where I think, dare I say, LMICs, including India, many other countries, but Bangladesh, of course, are probably falling behind a bit. We can do better, and your policy implication certainly appeal to that. So hopefully, Sanem may even want to take those comments together and may even provide some press release to the larger audience, and maybe put a little bit of dent on how we are running the show, which is pretty shitty. And that's academic work. Okay, with those words, I'll conclude. I think we're a little over by 4 minutes, but I don't want to. So yeah, spread your leg and see you next year, maybe. And thanks online participants. Certificates. What are we going to do? Oh, maybe you can give it. Okay, first one is fine. Second one, I don't check. Oh, thank you. And digital certificate too. Yes. Okay, I'll email you. Anything else? Money?